Okay, I go to Erev Shabbos Parshas Shemini, Shul virtual, drushes and absentee. It's become the new norm. And one thing we were hoping that would have became the new norm, many people were hoping for Pesach. My family and I, especially the first night of Pesach, comes midnight, Chatzos. We're waiting for Mashiach to come, Koshel Yahu. We almost expected him at the door. We need him now. We want him now. Achakalo b'chol yom sheyavo. Every day of our lives is achakalo b'chol yom sheyavo. But I think now, with this quarantine and this isolation, and just one after the next, people passing away, this list just within the Jewish community of hundreds of people, it's just a scary thing. And the unknown, we don't know what's going to be. We have that hand of God, this tiny molecule going around. Germ, not a molecule. And it's just a time when we really want Mashiach even more than normally. But sometimes we admit, sometimes you don't, Mashiach, and I'm okay the way things are. We have to always remember, don't be so afraid of the change. When Mashiach comes, yes, there won't be a Yetzer Hara, we won't want to do anything wrong, we'll want to do mitzvos, we'll be learning a lot of Torah, doing all the mitzvos, Shabbos. For many of us, everyone on their own level, it's a scary thing. Me, Shabbos, I'm not at that point yet. When Mashiach comes, if we make it and we merit in our own way to be a part of it, it's not a free get out of jail free card. We have to merit to be a part of it with our Emunah, with our faith, with our making an effort. Right? But we'll want only that. We would only want to be keeping Shabbos. That will be our desires. That will be our wants. We won't want any of the other trivial things of this world. We'll understand the purpose in us living. And that's really the ultimate purpose of Mashiach coming, that we can live where the spirituality will be so clear, the connection to Hashem and the purpose of life. So it's not something to be afraid of, but that's something that that we are mamin, we believe Mashiach is going to come one day. And in order that we'll have that desire only to serve Hashem. In this week's Parsha, there's an interesting thing. We mentioned that, I mentioned when we did the overview, in the video of the overview of the Parsha, how we have the story of Nadav and Avihu, two of our own sons, go into the Beis HaMikdash, and it's on the very first day that they're going, and Aaron is becoming the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash, or the Mishkan at that time. Each one goes, and they wanted to serve Hashem. So what do? They say, look, Abba, dad, is going, and he's bringing a machta, he's bringing a shovel with some spices on it, as a way of showing his dedication to Hashem. Let's do the same. Voluntarily, he has to. We'll do it as volunteers, even more special. A volunteer, altruistic. However, a fire came, spiritual fire, and it killed them, something within them. Perhaps it was a very rapid germ that the two of them picked up, but they died. While still inside, their cousins had to be sent in to go take them out. Moshe said to Aaron, Hu Hashetiba Hashem, now I know what it was. Hashem told me. He made a comment that there's going to be B'kroivei HaKadesh, through those that are close to me, I'm going to become holy. People are going to see that they have to be careful about how they act around the Beis HaMikdash, how they act around godly places, how we act in a shul as well. And Aaron is silent. And everybody talks about, what was the silence of Aaron? Was he silent? He was in so much pain. He was in so much shock. He was just dumbfounded. Was he silent because he was on such a spiritual level? He understood what it was all about and why it was a good thing and not a bad thing, etc., and why it was an honor. I don't know. What was this Vayidom Aaron? Let's take a look at a couple of things. But perhaps we could understand this Vayidom Aaron with a saying from Charles Noble. Charles Noble said, you must have long-range goals to keep you from being frustrated by short-term failures. If you want to have goals, you want to understand things and not become frustrated and distracted, you need to have long-term goals in order to keep from being frustrated by short-term failures. There's a story with the Kloisenberger Rebbe. The Kloisenberger Rebbe was a great Rebbe. I saw the story shared by Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg of the BRS, the Boca Raton Synagogue. And he shares the following story of the Kloisenberger Rebbe. There was a man who comes to the Kloisenberger Rebbe once, and he says to him, Rabbi Kusil Yuda Halberstam, he was known as the Divrei Yatziv, very saintly person, and a survivor of some of the worst horrors of the Holocaust. He had lost his wife and 11 children in the camps, and he survived. And he became a person who rebuilt his dynasty. He built, both in America and in Israel, the Kloisenberg and Sanze Hasidus, as well as many yeshivos and orphanages, not only for his own community, but for all the Jews, and the famed, beautiful Laniado Hospital in Netanya, among other things. And a person once comes over to the Kloisenberg Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I don't understand. So how did so many survivors find the courage? Not only did they survive, but they rebuilt their families. They started families again. They remained positive. They had faith. They had Emunah in society. They trusted people. How could that be? They went through the Holocaust. How could you trust people? How could you rebuild your life like that? How did people do this? No better person to ask than the Kloisenberger Rebbe. Listen to the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe says, Bidamayich chayi. Literally, with our blood we live. So it sounds like we just said it on the Seder night. We say, Bidamayich chayi, Bidamayich chayi, one of the times when we pour out or dip our finger into the cup of wine. The young man was a little startled, but he figured, okay, I understand. It was through that blood, through that sweat, or we say this by a bris milah when the child bleeds a little, and we say, B'damayich chayi, through the blood of your life, that's where life will come from. It has a different meaning now for now. So we figured it's an allusion to when it says in the Haggadah, B'damayich chayi, through the blood of the Karban Pesach, that they put there, which symbolized their sacrifice. That's how they did it. It was through the sacrifice of all the others that they got the strength. And the man commented, such. The Rebbe said, no, that's not what I meant. The secret formula is something else. The secret formula is what it says in Parshas Shemini. Our Parsha, Vayidom Aaron, Bidamayich, with the dome, with our quiet, with our silence, Chayi. That's how we learn. When Aaron heard of the tragedy that happened, Vayidom Aaron, he was silent. Pesach's a time, we just had the 4 questions, a time when we reiterate, ask questions, we teach the children. That's what Yiddishkeit's all about. It's an open book. Ask, try to understand. Why do we do this? What's this about? What's that about? Vayidom Aaron. In this week's parasha, we have the one time where it's Vayidom Aaron, there's silence. The Kloisenberger Rebbe was telling him something deeper. But before we explain, I want to share with you another story. In Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, at one point, on the floor where there are children, and we all know what KSM is, what Sloan Kettering is, SKM is. It's a frightening place to be, and just imagine the feelings of a bunch of parents who are sitting there by their children's bedsides, struggling with one of the greatest killers of mankind these days. And a couple of them decided, you know what, it's Shabbos, they're going to get together, a bunch of the Orthodox men over there, they'll eat their Shabbos food, sing some zmiros together, and hopefully they'll be able to feel Hashem and they'll be able to lift themselves out of their distress. And as they're sitting there, one of the guys said, you know, let's go around the table, everybody share a Dvar Torah, a thought on the Parsha, something uplifting. And they went from one guy to the next, and finally they come to one of the guys there, there's about 10, 15 people there, and one of them says, you know, I'm sorry, I've been here at my son's bedside all week. A young child, I haven't had a chance to open a sefer, to look at the parasha, I don't have what to say. But I have a question to ask. I was sitting in the room this week, and I was sitting next to my son who's attached to all these machines, fighting for his life in tremendous pain. And I look out the window, and I see over there a young boy around the same age as my son playing soccer, enjoying life, carefree. And I had a question for Hashem. If we are His children, why is my child, who's Hashem's child, suffering so much, while that child out there, fine child as he is, but he's not part of the Jewish nation in that aspect. Why is he carefree, healthy, and happy? And the men sat there in silence. Who could answer a father in such pain? There was one fellow there from Texas. After a few minutes, he says, I don't have an answer for you, but I want to tell you a question I had this week. He says, I have a son also, and my son has a roommate. And I was sitting there in my son's room, and I was wondering, I understand as a Jew, we're a people, we have a purpose, starting with Avraham Avinu, the first Jew. We put through tests, and we build our Emunah, and we build our faith, and we learn more and more to trust Hashem and to understand what Hashem is doing. So I understand it must be some reason, something that my child has to go through this, and the family as well. But why would his roommate, a young child who does not belong to our nation, why would he have to go through such illness, through such pain? What was the purpose? What could possibly be the purpose of that? Goes without saying, the two of them looked at each other and left those questions unanswered, perhaps in a Vayidom Aaron in a silence. But let me share with you a third story. I had the opportunity to pick up now over Pesach a gift that I got a while ago, this fascinating book over here. Great Jewish speeches. One of the great Jewish speeches that they bring is a speech that was given by Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, one of the greatest leaders of pre-war Europe. Rabbi Chanan gave this speech on the very last moments of his life. Rabbi Chanan was there with his yeshiva, with his students in his community in Baranovich, and they were led to the 9th fort. He was caught hiding by the Nazis, and they were led to the 9th fort, a place, and then they were all shot and killed into a big pit. Murdered, Shem Yimkim Damam. But he asked permission of the commander to say a few words. And listen to part of what Rabbi Chanan said at that time. There was a survivor or two who shared after what it was Rabbi Chanan said. One of the things Rabbi Chanan shared was this powerful story. He says there was once a man who knew nothing about agriculture, a real city guy. And he approaches a farmer. And he asks the farmer, he says, teach me how to farm. I want survival skills. I want to know how to farm. So the farmer tells the man, okay, come. You came at perfect time. He walks outside. As they walk towards his farmhouse, he shows him, he says, you see that beautiful field over there? And he sees this field, there's lush grass all over. It looks really nice, really pleasing to the eye. And the visitor says, wow, this is unbelievable. It's beautiful. How do you grow that? And he says, what? Come on. He hitches up his tractor to the plow. He gets in the plow and he starts going across that beautiful field, and he tills the ground, and it makes a big fat mess and destroys everything that was growing. And the visitor demands to know, what are you doing? Why are you destroying that? He says, be patient, hold on, says the farmer, you'll see soon. Then he comes to the barn and he takes out from the stockpile a big sack full of these plump kernels of wheat, fresh and dry. And he says, look, this is what you do with that. And the visitor is looking at this healthy grain, and he says, wow, that's a beautiful, beautiful crop you have over there. And he takes it and he watches in shock and horror as the farmer goes and he spoils the whole thing by grinding it up and mixing it. And then he goes and he walks up and down the furrows of the field, throwing little pieces of the grain all over the place and scattering the kernels till they get absorbed in the mud and dirt of the mess of the field that he had. The visitor starts screaming, are you insane? Are you crazy? What are you doing? First you destroy the field. Now you're wasting all the grain, just throwing it in the dirt and the mud. Come on, the stuff's worth good money. What are you doing with it? He says, be patient. You'll see. Come back in a few weeks. Time goes by and the farmer brings the visitor out to the field again. This time they see these endless rows of beautiful green stalks sprouting. The farmer says, oh, I apologize. Now I understand what you're doing. You made this field more beautiful than ever. Farming is really marvelous. Farmer says, no, we're not done yet. Come, be patient, watch. And he takes his guest to the field a few weeks later. And the man stands and watches in horror as the farmer goes and slaughters all those stalks. He cuts them down with a sickle. And he stands there watching open mouth, barely able to gasp. He says to the farmer, "What are you doing? You put so much work into that. Why are you destroying it?" The farmer says, "Be patient." Then he takes those stalks and he brings them into bundles. And then he takes them into another area where he grinds them and crushes them and destroys them into a mass of loose kernels and straw. And then he starts separating it. And finally, he says, "Oh, I got it," says the visitor. "I see, you're separating stuff. You have grain." He says, No, I'm not done yet." Takes that grain, he puts it on a big stone, takes another stone, and turns it around until he destroys all that grain, and it's this white, yucky powder. He says, "What is this?" Says, "It's flour." Says, "What?" Takes a little bit of it, puts it in his mouth, and starts coughing. The flour makes him choke. Says, "What are you doing? You destroyed those kernels. I don't understand. Why do you keep destroying things?" He says, "Patience, patience. You have yet to see the whole story." And he adds some water into the flour. And what do they end up with? This ugly mix, this yucky little dough. This ignoramus from the city doesn't know what that is. He looks and he says, "What is this?" And he shapes it into a loaf of bread. He says, "Oh, you have a loaf of bread. Beautiful. Now I understand." Smiling ear to ear. Farmer says, No, I'm not done yet." He goes over to a pile of logs, puts them in a little caboose, a little box, lights them. When he has a blazing fire, he takes that beautiful loaf of bread and he sticks it into that fire. And the man starts screaming at him, "You're insane. You gotta be crazy. All that work you put into this, months and months of labor and work and expense. And after all that, you burn the product of your labor. Are you insane?" The farmer looks at him and he starts laughing. Says, "Haven't I told you to be patient?" A few minutes later, he opens the oven door and he pulls out some freshly baked bread, crisp and brown with an aroma that made the man's mouth water. "Now come. Now you see, now you understand what I was doing, what I was baking." Sometimes, said Rabbi Chanan, God is like the farmer in the parable, and we are the tools. We don't begin to understand the outcome of the plan. We have no way to know what the next step will be. We're the ignoramus observing pieces of a process from the outside, not knowing what it really takes. And all we can do is be patient and have faith, knowing that Hashem is the one who's watching over us and is taking care of us. And there's something to it. Pesach taught us that we ask questions. Every question is legitimate. Every constructive question. Sometimes, most of the time, we answer. But sometimes things in history, things that occur, we can't answer. We don't yet know the answer. We're watching that process going on and on. That's at the Kloisenberger Rebbe. That's Vayidom Aaron. Bidamai chai. Sometimes it's with our silence. By not allowing those questions to stop us. By not being consumed with the unknown, with uncertainty. By understanding what we do know, what we don't know, like anything in the world, and not being let down by the anxiety, we're able to go and to rebuild in the face of tragedy. We're able to continue on and plow forward, building up our Emunah, our faith, more and more. Kadosh Baruch Hu brought us from day one until today. He created us in miraculous ways, each and every one of us, biologically, and in every other which way, and he will continue to hold us. But until then, sometimes when it comes in the face of struggles, of uncertainty, and of tragedies, and of loss, we have that credo of B'damayich Chayi, with silence is the way we survive, by realizing that we don't know the answers because we don't know the full story. And I'll end with a quote from Eli Wiesel. He was once asked, is there a tradition of silence in Judaism? Yes, he answered, but we don't talk about it. Have a wonderful Shabbos, a wonderful week. Please keep in touch. I love hearing from all of you. Take care. We miss you all. We can't wait for the day when we'll dance back into the shul, dancing and singing and clapping with the Hallel, with thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what he's done for us and for keeping us healthy and safe. Our thoughts and our hearts and our tefillos need to be with all of those that are ill, all of those that have lost loved ones. Many of us have, many of our members and members of people around the world, and we have to have our thoughts with them, those in our community and in society in general, and daven for refuah shalema for everybody. With Mashiach tzidkenu b'mheira b'yameinu, may we merit soon.